Do we still know nothing about the Jon Snow sequel series? Well, pretty much yeah. While Game of Thrones fans are at least happy with the franchise again given the grand reception and instant renewal of the House of Dragon, the prequel of Game of Thrones, they're still very angsty about what might come next. By that, we mean that they know about HBO is trying to flesh out the franchise once again, and apparently that includes possibly doing a Jon Snow sequel series. With Kit Harington returning to the play, Man Who Knows Nothing. But what do we know about what this series might be? We'll show you. Number 6. Jon Snow, How It All Began. If we're being honest here, Jon Snow does have one of the deepest arcs stories of Game of Thrones, and that might play into things overall. He was a fan favorite character right up until his rushed end in the series finale, so you can see why some might want to give him the chance to end on a better note. Kit Harington's very somber, in a good way, portrayal of him, and the fact that he was pretty much the only good man, outside of a small sect of others like Ned Stark, in all of Westeros, led him to being a great character to watch and see events unfold before him. The problem for him was that, at least at the start, he was the illegitimate son of Ned Stark, the Lord of Winterfell. Thus, his station was precarious at the best, as shown by the not-so-loving attention he got from Ned's wife. Still, he was beloved by Stark family, save Catelyn, and he knew that if he wanted to truly prove himself, he would need to go and join the Night Watch, where rank meant nothing, or so he was told, and he would be able to show his worth. Except that the Night Watch wasn't what was promised in various ways. This wasn't the noble watchers on the wall that the legends had promised. Instead, it was a collection of thieves, killers, betrayers, deserters, and illegitimate children like himself. To survive this new trial, he had to learn to grow and adapt, something that would be done by him throughout the series. Number 5. The Night Watch. As he grew alongside his brothers in the Night's Watch, he started to earn a reputation in both the good and bad ways. Mainly because he was much better than most of them in terms of combat because of his training with the Starks. But he also had a good streak that led him to getting blasted by some of the ones in charge. With the exception of Lord Mormont, who chose Snow as his successor when the time came, even giving him a sword that would save many lives later on. Because, as he would find out, there was more to fear outside the wall than the wildlings. There was the White Walkers, the ancient enemy of the men who were destined to break through the wall. Jon would face off against them in the frozen north, and even defend the wall against the wildlings. To this, he eventually becomes the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and after fully grasping the threat of the White Walkers, he opened the gates to let the wildlings through so that their force would be enough to fight the threat off. But this perturbed his enemies in the Night Watch and killed him for the watch, and it didn't stick, and he came back and killed them properly so that he could move on with his life. After all, his watch had ended. Number 4. King of the North. Enter his sister, Sansa Stark, who after her own incredibly dark story, don't ask, reunited with Jon in the hopes that they could reclaim Winterfell for the Starks. It wasn't easy, and he almost got all of them killed. Remember, he knows nothing. But eventually he was able to fight off the Boltons and retake the North. And to his surprise, he was rewarded for this by being given the title of the King of the North, something that an illegitimate son shouldn't have gotten, and yet his deeds have proved his worth. But those deeds were put to the test when he needed to get more from the invasion of the White Walkers, and thus he went to someone he didn't expect to meet when his journey began, Daenerys Targaryen. The Dragon Queen had just made landfall when he arrived and asked for help, which she was willing to give, if he bent the knee, which he wouldn't do because he knew that there were bigger problems than her ego. He'd be able to look beyond her ego soon enough though. Number 3. Queen Slayer. Eventually, Jon would earn favor with Daenerys after he advised her on how to recover from a loss, and then when she too realized that the threat of the White Walkers, after seeing them for herself and losing one of her dragons to save Jon and the others, they became allied for the noble cause of saving all life. And they did. At the Battle of Winterfell, they were able to fend off the Night King's armies and last long enough for Arya Stark to kill the king himself. But the fight was not over. They had to take out Cersei Lannister, and this was where things really went off the rails in the eyes of the fans, critics, and well, pretty much everyone who watched the episode. You heard about the petition signed by millions, right? Because after the loss of a friend and yet another dragon, Daenerys went nuclear, and burn the town of King's Landing to the ground in order to reclaim it as hers and her family's, completing the cycle of violence that was foretold long ago. Oops. Oh, Jon and Daenerys. Not only were they a couple by this point, but Jon found out that Daenerys was his aunt. Welcome to Game of Thrones. When his aunt said that she wanted to help in bringing the rest of the kingdoms to heel, he said no and killed her. Then, as if to twist the knife more on fans, they banished him to the frozen north where the other wildlings, which he gladly did, and his story ended. Until the announcement of the sequel series happened, that is. Number 2. The sequel series plot. So given everything that Jon Snow went through and the fact that his loop was tied, if you will, the question then becomes, what in the world will this series be about? We honestly don't know, and no indications have yet been given to us, likely due to how early in the works the show is. The early thoughts are that this is going to be about Jon healing from everything that happened in the series finale, see killing his aunt lover and being banished, and trying to adjust to his new role of leading the wildlings. But while that might be a good for a single season, that's not justification for it to happen at all. Not to mention, without the White Walkers out there, the only real threat to deal with is the other wildlings, and that'll get old really quickly. Some think that Jon will be called back into service and thus start a quest for redemption, but that would be very much undermine what came before, and we don't need that. We do need to note that Kit Harington himself apparently pitched this idea and George R.R. Martin's blessing on it, as this would be out of canon due to the books not being done yet. So if nothing else, it's not being done by the people who made Game of Thrones, not in the showrunner position at least. But the question still remains. Number 1. Do we actually need this? That is a question, isn't it? Many aren't happy about this for the simple reason that this appears to be an attempt by HBO to win back the fans, even though they lost them pretty well and thoroughly after the season finale, and to some the whole 8th season. Not to mention we just got House of Dragon, and at the time of this writing has only debuted 1 episode. It was a good episode apparently, but that's hardly the point now, is it? Yes, they've already renewed season 2 of the show, but that doesn't mean we need a Jon Snow series. Yes, there have been shows as of late that have gotten sequel series to redeem key characters and reverse endings, and some of them have worked out, others haven't. House of the Dragon didn't circumvent the ending of Game of Thrones. It just made it clear that this good series could still be told here. We'll have to wait and see if HBO can really make a Jon Snow series work, or if they really do know nothing. So, what do you think? What do you think of this look at Jon Snow's time in Game of Thrones, and whether that sets up a sequel series well enough? Do you want a Jon Snow sequel series, or do you think House of Dragons show that there are other stories that can indeed be told? Let us know in the comments section down below, and we'll see you next time on the channel.